Well, good evening, everyone. A very big thank you for joining us in Manchester here at Soho House, Manchester. I'm Francesca Oakeman-White. I'm the founder of the Beauty Triangle, and I'm so excited to be launching the Beauty Triangle outside of London. We've only been here for a few hours, but already I think Soho House Manchester is by far the friendliest of all the Soho houses. Tonight we're going to be talking about future-proofing. After all, I think we can agree there are so many buzzwords being thrown around at the moment, from longevity to biohacking, regeneration to prevention. And I think what that does is it makes very simple acts like taking care of our skin, supporting our bodies, and strengthening our inner well-being suddenly feel incredibly complex. So how can we go about being more proactive as we approach aging, both physically and emotionally? And how can we forge ahead with confidence as science and skincare continuously evolve? Now, when we set up the Beauty Triangle, it was to educate and empower audiences on all aspects of their well-being, and always critically from a holistic standpoint, which is why you'll always find 3 practitioners on our panel, each of whom is an absolute expert in their given field. But we also wanted to break down those conversations, those stigmas in well-being that were so often going unspoken, and in doing so, connect you with the most trusted voices in well-being. On that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's amazing speakers. I'm joined by aesthetic doctor and founder of Skin Doctor Clinics, Dr. Saleena Zimri. I'm joined by functional medicine practitioner and former surgeon, Dr. Mayoni Gooneratne. And finally, by meditation expert and intuitive, Emily Halil. And together, we're really going to be exploring the tools, the treatments, and the philosophies that are really shaping the next era of preventative wellness, from skin optimization and collagen stimulation through to the deeper connections that exist between energy, hormones, and emotional resilience. A little bit of housekeeping. Hopefully you'll have found a program on your seats as well as a referral card. So if you'd like us to connect you with anyone that you hear speak this evening, you can just leave your details on the card and we'll do that afterwards. We have time for an audience Q&A at the very end, so please save up any questions until then. And finally, we have an amazing goodie bag for everyone before you leave, with some real goodies from Julaine, including a gua sha, an SPF, and all sorts of wonderful bits in there. So please don't leave without one of those. I think that's everything from me. I'm going to hand over to our brilliant practitioners. They're going to say a very quick hello, and then we'll get started with the main conversation. So, Saleena, over to you.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Yes, I'm Dr. Saleena Zimri. I have been an aesthetic practitioner for 16 years now. I founded Skin Doctor Clinics. We are now at 4 clinics now in the UK. Largely up north, so we've got Leeds, Manchester, York, and I do have one in London as well. I'm an ex-GP SI in dermatology, so my background was really in derm and general practice, and I brought that into the aesthetic medicine world, and we've slowly brought the business to life over the last 16 years, and we do a lot of regenerative aesthetics. It's kind of what the future. So
perfect. Yeah. Nice nod to the future-proofing thing. Thank you. Thanks, Saleena. Mayoni.
Hi, I'm Mayoni Gooneratne, and I'm a former colorectal and pelvic floor surgeon. I left the NHS and I set up my own aesthetics practice 11 years ago now, and very quickly realised that women needed to talk to me about everything, which I love, and very quickly created Mind Fit, Body Fit and Skin Fit, and really just kept evolving what I was delivering to the women that came to see me. It was mostly women. Added hormone treatments and other services really to my portfolio, either ones that I did myself through extra training, or added through providers that we have in our practice. That evolved. I undertook my functional medicine training and longevity training, and really for me it is about helping people to understand, number one, how accessible health is, and take that into their everyday really. So that's me.
Amazing. Thanks, Emily.
Hi everyone. So my name is Emily Halil. I'm a psychic, a tarot intuitive, and also a meditation teacher. I did actually start my career in tech, but 6 years ago I founded my own practice supporting women primarily, really helping them to create a space to reconnect with themselves through meditation, but also through intuitive guidance. And I'm really looking forward to exploring with you this evening how spirituality, emotional well-being, and inner awareness is becoming increasingly more important in what it means to be future-proofing ourselves for health reasons.
Really looking forward to hearing your insights as well, Emily. Thank you. So we'll get started with the main conversation. Our first practitioner is Dr. Saleena Zimri, and as Saleena explained, she takes a very regenerative approach to skin health, and she does some amazing work with collagen stimulation as well, which we're going to be learning all about. But Saleena, maybe you can give us your perspective. When we're here to talk about future-proofing, what does that mean when we're looking at the skin specifically? And would you say that future-proofing is something that your patients are starting to become more clued up about and ask you about a little more?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think, the newer patient is massively educated now, largely because they've been a lot on social media. They're perhaps not new to aesthetics. Those days have gone, really. Everyone has tried something, some sort of tweak. Not everyone, but most people have tried something. And, it might be that they started with a bit of toxin or they started with a bit of filler. And now I feel like they're a little bit more armed with information. Sometimes social media isn't always the best information, but it does give you kind of a really nice broader picture of most things. And I think, the newer regenerative type approach is growing phenomenally. And I think people are really looking to future-proof their skin in the sense that they want to prevent rather than cure. And I think that's where they're starting, and they're learning a lot more about what collagen is and what the process of collagen production and banking is.
Do you see patients being confused almost because they have access to so much information? Like you said, social media gives us, reel after reel of somebody giving them expertise in this area, but almost that overwhelm can lead to indecision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, luckily, I think a lot of people, they come to us and they know something, but they might not know everything. And they'll say, right, I've seen this online and I want this. But actually, towards the end of the conversation, they'll be like, actually, you tell me what you think I should have, because although I know about X, Y, and Z, I actually don't know if it's right for me.
Exactly.
And I think that's where social media is a positive in the sense that you learn a lot about a variation of different treatments. But sometimes you don't always know if that's the right thing for you, and that's where your professional comes into play.
Agreed.
They will guide you through that and say, right, yes, that's correct for you, or that's not correct for you, and you don't really need that. Let's start with something else.
That they can almost steer you away from those trends that otherwise we can become sort of indoctrinated by and think, well, this is the only route, this is what everyone's doing, so this is what I think I should also be doing.
Exactly that. And, trends come and go. But I think people appreciate now their practitioner's sort of opinion on what is good for them.
What's right for them, exactly. Yeah. Which treatments at the moment are incredibly popular? What's everyone wanting right now?
I think if I look across all my 4 clinics, I mean, they are slightly different demographics and obviously different locations in the UK. And I'd say overwhelmingly, the top sort of 3 would be, and again, some of this is driven by social media and general education out there, but I'd say things like CO2.
So laser.
Yeah, your regenerative treatments, so like your Julaines, skin boosters, a lot of lower face type treatments.
Oh yes, you're very, very, Saleena's very sought after for jaw tight, which is an incredible way to sort of sculpt the lower face.
And that's it, and people don't always want to go down the surgical route, so they're looking for sort of non-surgical options that actually give real results. Because you could easily spend thousands of pounds on something on a machine that perhaps doesn't give you the result that you need on your lower face, but perhaps are not ready or don't want to go down the surgical route. So the jaw tight is that very nice happy medium in between.
And I guess what you've just pinpointed there is just that importance of having that dialogue as well, and having that conversation with your practitioner. Is this right? Is this going to sort of suit me? Is this going to give the desired outcome? Going back to trends, because you mentioned collagen, it strikes me that collagen is the one trend that never goes out of fashion. It really does stand the test of time. But before we dive a little deeper, what exactly is collagen, and when do we need to start paying more attention to it?
So collagen is probably one of our most abundant proteins in the body, and that's exactly what it is. It's a protein. It's built of basic amino acids, and it provides, in very sort of basic terms, the structure of and support to our skin. So not just skin, bone, cartilage. And when we're looking at skin, really, we're looking at its actual support and building units or building blocks of our skin, and it helps to improve. It helps with the elasticity, with providing function in terms of structure, and overall kind of health of the skin.
And why do we have to start being more alert to it? Was what sort of it's about 25 or so they say, isn't it?
So it's younger than you'd imagine, actually. So we do start to lose collagen as early as your mid-20s, and each year there's a certain percentage that we're losing. That then accelerates perimenopausally as the estrogen. So our collagen production is in women especially is driven by estrogen. So as that starts to decline, unfortunately, our collagen production declines as well quite rapidly. So the closer you are to the menopause, the more likely that your collagen is depleting.
And it's interesting because Mayoni and I were talking about menopause actually affecting women younger and younger all the time as well. So it strikes me that collagen banking, stimulation, this is something that we need to be thinking about proactively from a much younger age. I mean, drawing on those two terms, banking and stimulation when it comes to collagen, how do you define those? What's the difference between the two?
I guess stimulation is that process of producing more collagen. You don't do that on its own. You need help. So
from someone like you.
Yes, and from something like the Julaine. So that will help to start to regenerate the collagen. The banking is dependent on what you're using to regenerate that. So the banking is the idea that collagen, the new collagen that you produce, is lasting a fair amount of time. So for example, if we're using Julaine, that could last up to 2 years. And that's what you want. You don't want a quick collagen burst and then that degrades and it's gone. You want something that will bank and last longer.
And I want to talk more about Julaine in a little bit because I know that's a really key part of your practice. But what are the key culprits that are contributing to collagen loss? I mean, I know we sort of discussed hormones, perimenopause. Is there anything else that we need to be a little more mindful of on the day-to-day?
Number one is UV. So sun, unfortunately, we love it, but it's aging us.
If I had £1 for every time I said, and wear your sun cream, not just when it's not just when it's sunny, even when the clouds are there.
Well, that's it. The UVA is for aging. So yes, the biggest culprit is the biggest cause of aging and collagen loss is UV. So protecting your skin is really important. And then you've got things like lifestyle factors. So if you're a smoker, you're accelerating that. If you're unfortunately a massive yo-yo dieter, GLP-1, massive runner's face, all that kind of thing. These kind of lifestyle factors can contribute. Obviously, certain genetic disorders and things like that that can also add to it. And then, of course, the other big thing is estrogen loss from perimenopause and up to menopause.
And so to go back to Julaine, so this is something that you mentioned is a huge part of your practice now. It strikes me that collagen stimulators, biostimulators, they're very much back in the spotlight now. Why is this, and how is a product like a collagen stimulator or a Julaine, how is that different to the more traditional injectables that we might be familiar with, say dermal fillers?
Yeah, so I guess the difference is that you have to imagine your dermal fillers is replacing obvious volume loss, and that's what it should be there for. And I think when we look back at aesthetics, that's kind of primarily what we used to use a lot of. We still do, but we now understand the kind of aging process a little bit better than that. That it's not just about volume. Of course, some of our fat pads deplete, and that's what filler is designed for, to replace the fat that we're losing. However, that's not affecting your actual skin quality and the collagen production in the skin. So you're almost like, imagine you have a mattress and a bed sheet. You're inflating your mattress, but you're not ironing the bed sheet. And the difference in the Julaine, like that.
I'm only laughing because I feel like every doctor always uses this bed analogy.
Yeah,
I've heard so many surgeons
talk
about.
I've been hammering on it
So
for
good.
16 years. I'm like, this bed. But no, and again, so the Julaine is really for that kind of holistic 360 approach where regenerating the actual skin quality and improving skin elasticity, its structure, its support mechanism, and improving the quality and health of the actual skin itself. And we've gone through that whole overfilled phase of, well, it made us look better, so we're going to go back for more filler. And then it gets to the point where we've actually tipped over the edge of what it's designed to do, and we're now looking a bit overdone. So this is that nice balance of, yes, fill what needs to fill, but then we need to work on things like skin quality, And that's where something like Julaine would come into play.
It's definitely a more mindful approach to injectables, I would say. Yeah. Who is the typical patient coming in for a product like this? Because I remember when I first started working in journalism, like 15 years ago or something, and we would talk about collagen stimulators, biostimulators, and they were always the domain of the more mature patient. Mm-hmm. And it strikes me now that we're very much talking about collagen stimulation as that preventative, as that proactive measure, in your late 20s, in your early 30s even, which is a really interesting movement.
Yeah, and I guess that's because we are learning more about the aging process, and we know it's starting younger than we thought, and actually it comes to that kind of, prevention rather than cure situation, where if you actually start early at the early signs of collagen loss, before you even realize it's happening, you're banking or reproducing collagen and regenerating it, then you're going to have a better outcome in the future. But it's almost like you wouldn't even know, because you wouldn't know what it was like if you'd not done it. Yeah, exactly. But you're preserving that situation. So actually, my client base is coming in younger because they are a little bit more educated, and they're aware that they don't just have to have filler. They can have other things to help to kind of future-proof their skin, improve collagen production, improve skin health and quality without actually adding huge volume. And actually, if we look at if we speak to a lot of the plastic surgeons now who are doing facelifts, their facelift clients are coming in younger. And
so true.
I almost wonder whether that's because, perhaps the millennials weren't quite aware of the whole regeneration and prevention thing, mm-hmm. and, they've let things slide, and then they get to kind of like early 40s, and they're like, oh,
shit, I need to address this.
Yes, exactly. And it's kind of almost
and
then
it's
too
a
far.
real heavy lifting job sort of required, whereas we're being a little bit more elegant, a bit more strategic. We have more of a game plan now. Yeah. And I think what's quite interesting about sort of the new category of collagen stimulators, like you mentioned, Julaine, it has sort of like a spherical particle, right? So we've always been told that there can be a lot of inflammation caused by these injectables, and I think for a long time people have been quite wary about it, but now it seems that there's a lot more science, there's a lot more robust data to show that long term we're not going to have those side effects. And I think that's more in keeping with not wanting so much downtime, being able to face the world immediately again.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's the beauty of this industry, is we are always progressing, and there's newer things, and there's newer generation of treatments. And Julaine is exactly that. It's seen the old data, it's seen the older products, and it's kind of made a newer version of that. And that's exactly what we want in any industry. You want the newer generation of that previous product. A bit like your GLPs, they are going through different phases now. You've got the third and fourth generations, and they just keep improving. So that's where Julaine for me stands now. It is that newer generation. It has a safer safety profile, better type of collagen stimulation, better longevity with it.
You don't need to do any sort of awkward massaging at the end of treatment.
No, I still encourage it, because I do think there's some good science to help stimulate fibroblasts, and and I think it's a good practice for the patients just to do that. I actually find it helps to reduce swelling quicker as well, like lymphatics. So I encourage it, but I just say to them, look, if you forget or you can't be bothered, fine.
And how many sessions do you need? Is this a one-off treatment?
So I generally suggest 3 sessions. I think that is generally what they advise as well, and it's usually typically once a month, and that should last them, the results should last up to 2 years, but I do advise a top up in between somewhere, just because obviously you're not going to maintain 100% of that collagen for 2 years. You're going to start to see some natural decline, and then just to keep topping that up to maintain the structure.
It's that sort of very slow and steady strategic game plan, isn't it? They say sometimes you can't see the results immediately, but when they kick in, suddenly you're like, oh yes, this is what I've been waiting for.
Exactly that. And even a good facelift surgeon now will tell you need to regenerate your skin, you need to improve skin quality. Your best outcomes in surgery actually will be on women who have got really good healthy skin. So they encourage things like, or a good surgeon would encourage things like that. And also,
it's interesting because actually you hear a lot of surgeons really bad-mouthing a lot of collagen stimulators, but when you and I discussed this ahead of the talk, you were saying actually you think it would be really good practice to almost have Julaine as a sort of precursor, maybe not immediately before the facelift, but if you think that surgery is in your future, it's not something to be so scared of, because it is going to get the tissues into really great nick.
Absolutely. And I've spoken to a few of my colleagues actually who are amazing facelift surgeons, and actually the ones who understand skin and the science behind it, they will understand that actually this is the perfect type of treatment to have beforehand. And it might be that you do it 6 to 9 months or 12 months before you're planning a facelift, to again help that tissue quality, because one thing surgery can't do is improve your tissue quality. So
It's so true.
you know, if you've got better tissue quality, one, you're going to have a better result, and two, improve downtime, improve outcomes. So you know, some surgeons used to just prescribe some good skincare, but actually there's more to that now, and some of them do a CO2, for example, at the same time as their facelifts. However, you can actually start well before that and really...
I think it's such an elegant idea. When I go in for my facelift, I will be having absolutely
I'll be
every
everything.
treatment done simultaneously. I think it's the future. You mentioned skincare, and I definitely want to come back to asking you about that. But final question on Julaine, can you use it elsewhere? Can it be done for the body as well? I mean, sort of thinking, you know, collagen loss doesn't affect just the face, does it?
Well, exactly. Look, your skin's your biggest organ, and it's all over you. License-wise, it is licensed for the nasolabials. However, most doctors go off license, and we know that actually it's the same effect in any parts of the skin that we're using. So for me personally, for example, I use it sort of really everywhere on the face. Necks, I do décolletage, I do arms, so that kind of crepey skin on the arms.
Yes, that's such a hard area to treat, I feel like.
And it does fantastic. I've even done knees. Yeah, that kind of crepey skin on the knees, or where it's starting to lose a little bit of that kind of support.
Tummies, just asking as somebody who's
yeah,
postpartum.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I might be coming to your London-based clinic.
Not done down below yet, but everything else I've done.
Well, like I said, collagen loss, it's everywhere. Yeah. Yes, exactly, the bottom.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about skincare and where this fits into the whole picture, because obviously we can do everything that you recommend that is suitable for us in clinic with you, but there's a huge onus on us as well doing what we need to do from our homes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I always say that skincare is such a minefield, isn't it? Like when I get headaches starting to think about it sometimes. I just wonder how the common person...
Particularly, like you say, when the social media comes in and it's
you need
influencer
this,
after
you need
influencer
that.
showing you every product under the sun that they're using.
Exactly.
19-step routine.
Yeah.
I'm lucky if I manage 2. Cleanser, SPF out.
Absolutely. Especially my nighttime routine, it really needs improving, but I always say, look, there's kind of certain power products that we should be using that has the most amount of evidence in dermatology. One is obviously SPF. 2 is a retinol of some sort, ideally a tretinoin, which is a prescription form of retinol. But again, it just depends on your, how you cope with it and how that certain skin copes with it as well. But there are different types of forms that can be accustomed to certain skin types. And then, so there you kind of 2 power products. And then a good serum, some sort of anti-aging serum. So nowadays the buzzwords are things like your PDRNs. You might want to use, if you've got problematic skin, you might want to then add in something like azelaic acid, or an antioxidant is obviously something that most people should be using. So an SPF, an antioxidant, some form of retinol are kind of my 3 go-to things. And then everything else would be depending on skin type. So if you're looking for an anti-redness product, if you're a bit more oily and you've got more acne, then you might be wanting to add in certain, salicylic acid type things. So again, then it would come down to skin types. If it's just more kind of just anti-aging, then it might add in more of the anti-aging type products. But those 3 things I would say is kind of real basics.
Yeah, okay. Back to basics. Skincare is exactly what we need. Amazing. Thank you so much, Saleena. That was fascinating.
Thank you so much.
And any questions for Saleena, we can ask her at the end. Our next speaker is the wonderful Dr. Mayoni Gooneratne. Mayoni is a functional medicine practitioner. She leaves literally no stone unturned when it comes to fine-tuning the health and the well-being of her patients. But Mayoni, maybe you can start by telling us how you interpret the term future-proofing as a functional medicine practitioner.
I think for me, it's making sure that your health is available to you to allow you to do what you want for as long as you want. And that means really making sure that your mind, your body, and your spirit is all in alignment for as long as possible. There are lots of words used now: longevity, health span, peak span has been recently kind of coined as well.
I've not heard peak span.
Peak span is, you can add it to the list, but it's beyond health span, so it's the time that you have your peak health available to you. So your optimal health that's available to your functioning. So you could have a 70-year-old who's still working at a really high VO2 max, for example, so that they're able to climb Kilimanjaro. You know, and I think that's really important.
But I love that as well, because again, it drills down into the what's right for you. We're all individuals, and we're each going to have our own rhythm when it comes to optimal functionality and well-being as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the first pieces of a consultation for me, is to pull out, what are your goals? What is your best health available for you for? Is it what you wanted to do when you're 18? And actually a lot of women have forgotten what they wanted to be doing. And I kind of, we were talking about this earlier in the toilets. You know, it's a great remembering, I think, for me. It's a lot of that is just unravelling those kind of layers of you that have been built up. You know, I'm that person as well. It's, you kind of start off your life with these incredible goals, and then life can happen and your health is often left on the sidelines. So bringing your health along with you on that journey so that you're actually able to utilise that. And we talked about this earlier, didn't we, that you're able to sort of put your money into into a pension, a financial pension, but actually, what is your health pension? What are you going to do? How are you going to access all of that money and use that money when you're older? Like, you've got to be able to actually use your health to make sure that you're able to live that best possible life for as long as possible. And that's really important for me.
I love that. And you and I were talking about this, and I said there's that expression, it's not about adding years to your life, it's adding life into your years. And I think that whole piece is sometimes forgotten about in pursuit of biohacking, physical optimization, chasing, you know, the wearables, the stats, how many hours did I sleep? You know, what's my glucose monitor saying to me at the moment? And I think sometimes we need to remember that actually it's about that bigger picture and sort of how happy we are on the day-to-day as well. Who are the patients that find their way to your door? Because it strikes me that you take a very deep approach, actually, for a functional medicine practitioner. People would assume it was diagnostics and testing, but who are the women that actually do benefit from the consultation with yourself?
Yeah, I think, so I'm now the medical director of PHC Clinics, where we are a metabolic health clinic. We're online. And metabolic health for me really means that we talk to a lot of the symptoms that most women and men sort of struggle with. So it could be someone with chronic sort of complex metabolic needs, so brain fog, weight loss resistance, anxiety, sleep issues, which all sound like very disparate symptoms, but actually when you put them together, for me, it's like an instant kind of checklist of these symptoms that are leading to a very pronounced underlying cause. There's often a sort of a trauma part to this, which I'm finding more and more when I talk to women. The other kinds of people are those with an element of metabolic dysfunction, very clear dysfunction, so endometriosis, PMOS, as it's now being called, from PCOS, and maybe even non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. These conditions have got a very clear underlying inflammatory component. And then, of course, we see people who just want to optimise and who want to really kind of elevate their sort of health practice as well.
And to what extent do hormones influence the conversation that you're having? How often are hormones to blame with, the weathering those storms that a lot of us might go through as women?
I think I might rephrase the question in that hormones, I think we always think hormones are the enemy, and actually they are our friend. They are here to protect us. They are transducers. There's no accident that they line up with our chakra points. They are, produced as a method of communication and understanding of our environment, and so our thyroid glands, our adrenals, our ovaries, they are really important pieces of information gathering devices. So actually, when things start to go wrong, they will show up in our ability to conceive, our periods, our brain fog. All these symptoms are just signs. And the beautiful thing is nature's actually given us this window to pick up on these signs where we can do something about it. So it's not game over. It's
a good way of looking at it, to see these symptoms as like little red flags, to go, actually, now I need to take a sort of more proactive approach to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that conversation can start really young. I've got 3 children, my 2 daughters and my son. I talk to them about hormones, and it's, to the point when they possibly eyeball roll a little bit. But, my middle daughter, I've done her nutrigenomic testing because actually she's got a very significant level of sensitivity to histamine. And it started when she was 9, and we realised it was a stress response, and she would just come out in an urticaria in response to anything, really. Which then actually we now know is very much related to some of her genetic coding, which just is empowering. It's incredible data for her. She now knows what to do to try and help herself through her nutrition, through her exercise choices at the age of 14. And I'm really excited to see how she continues to evolve that information into her life.
It's amazing because it suggests that perhaps that wasn't sort of back in the day an option, that you would have even been able to sort of find that out for her. Do most people find having the access to that data from the test, from the diagnostics, do they find it empowering, or is it ever a case? I sometimes feel like we're so plugged into so many devices and we get so much data on ourselves that it can almost lead to that overwhelm, and then we don't quite know which direction to even take our health in.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's why we're very selective on the kind of testing that we do and when we deploy it. I think it's important. I'm a doctor first, so I would take a full history. My history is take an hour and a half with a preliminary set of questions as well. So I want to literally walk a day in the life of my client that's sitting in front of me and really understand what's going on. What are the triggers and the levers that are pulling her pathways? So then we will decide on the testing that's going to give her the most value. I'm very conscious of how that information is given back to that patient, which is why I think it's important to be conscious of the testing companies that are out there that are just testing and giving you your results for you to go and chat GPT yourself to death, really, and worry about it, because it is a very kind of scary place to sit, because it's like anything, isn't it? If you start to Google, what does a COMT mean? What does this SNP mean? What does my, insulin resistance mean? Like it kind of triggers lots of very scary messages. So I think these are still important clinical tools that need to be used strategically, really. And
also hand in hand with the right practitioner and somebody who has the knowledge and the insight to be able to really determine them and decipher them. Yeah. Versus, I think you're right, I think we're all on autopilot now. If we have a question, we ask ChatGPT or Claude or whoever we like that month. And I think sometimes we sort of forget that people are in this position of authority and knowledge, and those are the people we should be leaning on, not always just technology. You mentioned fertility earlier, you mentioned menstrual cycles, endometriosis, all of these other sort of areas when you and I spoke as well. I'm interested to understand to what extent that reproductive health again comes into the conversation. Is this something that you're seeing more of a trend towards now as we think about future-proofing?
I think so, and I think there's lots of conversations that are very different, and it's really interesting. I think I'm seeing, number one, women who are younger and younger. They're very informed, much like our aesthetics patients. They really do know their stuff, but they don't quite have the answers. They may have suffered with symptoms of heavy periods and irregularity for many, many years, with very few answers. The average patient with endometriosis, we know, has suffered for at least 10 years and has had over 40 different consultations with healthcare practitioners before they get a diagnosis. So it's really important to help manage these very vulnerable women sensibly. So it may be a sort of period-related thing, and it may be a fertility sort of related thing as well. But it may not be with the intention of conceiving right now. It's almost like, what do I need to do to make sure that when I choose to have a child, I'm as optimal as possible, which again is a really interesting conversation to have with women. We talked about a lady who was at the top of her game as a health tech specialist in her company, and actually her HR department had approached her about helping her to freeze her eggs in order to preserve her career. So these are really very nuanced conversations that we're now seeing coming out, and she was kind of like, I don't know what to say to them, what do I do?
Yeah, so, exactly. It's crazy. It's gone from sort of being offered health insurance to now we can freeze your eggs if you just stay and work a little longer, a few more years with us. But what I really love is your approach that is very much about joining all those dots and being that person, I think, for your patient that can really pull everything together. Because I think so often when we're dealing with a very complex health condition, wellness concern, we end up having so many different conversations to so many different people, and there's no one to really pull it all together for us. And I think that's what you're really exceptional at doing. So I think that's a really sort of smart way to be looking at our future health. You and I spoke a little bit about the fact that as women, we always talk about our biological clock, or some of us do, probably me. But actually, you mentioned something to me, which is the ovarian clock. And you said to me that has a really profound impact on our future health and even health span. Why is that, and what is the ovarian clock?
So our ovaries are almost independent to everything else. To all the other clocks that are actually available to us. We can look at telomere length, we can look at DNA structure and methylation, and we can look at glycans, for example, and different proteins in the blood. So there are lots of different chemical markers and messages we can look at. But our ovaries, actually, as women, are totally independent, and they are probably the ultimate time clock that we have that makes the biggest imprint. They're an independent variable to all the other clocks. So it's almost pointless talking about your methylation status or your kind of glycan age without understanding what's happening to your ovaries. So we can actually assess this now using 3 specific markers, which are simply done on your bloods, and that gives you an ovarian age to when you're going to menopause, which I think if I'd known about that 20 years ago, I probably would have been terrified, quite frankly. But I think now we have got tools and we've got accessibility to specialists to help women understand how to modify that. We can change that time to menopause age, which is, I think, again, empowering. It gives, women like that lady that I was talking about, more data. Like, how long does she actually have until she's going to menopause? When should she be even thinking about maybe having a reimplantation? Is that too much information? I don't know. I think what is important to know is that our perimenopause, that time running up to our menopause when our ovaries stop working, is the biggest and most powerful window that we as women have to alter our future health. So if we're talking about future-proofing, it's probably the biggest time that we have to do something meaningful that we're probably, a lot of women are missing.
How interesting, because I also think that the perimenopausal conversation has only just reignited, or ignited, you should say, a few years ago. For such a long time we just spoke about menopause, and the peri part was completely forgotten. I mean, Saleena, you said as well, it's when we really need to start thinking about things like collagen stimulation. It's this really pivotal window, but it's a big window as well, where this isn't a sort of blink and you'll miss it, which is also a nice sort of message. How long on average are most of us in perimenopause for?
So this can vary hugely, and I would say ask your mother or your grandmother, but unfortunately we also know that the window is shrinking due to endocrine disruption that we have in our environment now. So it's around 10 years for a lot of women, but it can start as early as when you were 35. I started really early, but I didn't know because I was in a cloud of babyland and everything else. So actually my brain was beginning to shut down. I didn't realise, and that's very common for a lot of women. So
what do we need to be more attuned to recognise those first early symptoms of perimenopause?
So there's a really lovely paper that clarifies this, because actually there is no medical sort of definition, as it were, of what are the signs and symptoms of. But the first thing is an regularity of your period, so an increase or a decrease in your cycles, often associated with a change in your period, which could be heavier, longer periods, or shorter, lighter periods, or even just changing, that constant changing of your cycles, which again, if you're sort of postnatal or whatever, you don't know. And the other one is the reducing effect of progesterone on your brain. So progesterone is a neurosteroid, and you start to see symptoms of anxiety, brain fog, and sleep disturbances. Again, these could very well be kind of overlapping with a mum, who's having, because a lot of my patients now have their children in their 30s. So it is and they're often going back to a high-powered job. So there's just a lot of cortisol floating around as well, which can also cause these things.
I was about to say, to me, it sounds like baby brain, which, apparently lasts for about 3 years. So exactly at what point does it stop being baby brain and become perimenopausal brain and then sort of go on from there? But it's incredibly nuanced.
Yeah, it is nuanced. And I think one of the ways that I would do that then is sort of obviously history, but testing. We can look at blood tests to look at that. And again, another big fallacy that I sort of hear from my patients is they're kind of dropped on the line of fine, I always call it. They're sort of told they're fine on their blood tests, but actually the bloods that have been done are in no way comprehensive enough to look for the important markers. Like I say, progesterone is literally thrown off a cliff very early on. Estrogen hangs around for quite a long time and sort of can actually swing wildly. So you would actually, what I look for are ratios, and that's really powerful data. It's the ratio between your progesterone to estrogen, which helps along with your symptoms.
Changing tack a little bit, you're a big advocate for metabolic age, being at the correct metabolic age. What exactly is that? Because I feel like we often talk about our biological age, we talk about our chronological age, but where does metabolic age fit into this conversation?
Yeah, as if we need another thing to worry about.
Exactly.
Sorry. I'm just trying to, I think what's important is the bits that we pull out these are like real like lever changes, and they are things that are going to make a big impact on your health. So metabolic age is really something that we can calculate. We can look at with some markers around your bloods, for example, insulin resistance, your glucose, your fasting glucose, and LDLs and things. But we can also look at some more physical markers, things like VO2 max, which is your capacity to bring oxygen into your bloodstream when you're working and exercising at maximum capacity.
Is that where they make you run on a treadmill with a
it's
face
not a nice
mask
test,
on?
yeah.
Yes.
There are other derivatives that we can use. So actually, if you looked at your Apple Watch, you've got a derivative of it, which actually is now very, very accurate. We can look at physical things. We can do DEXA scans to look at your muscle mass and your visceral fat, for example. These are all components. We can put that together to give you a metabolic age, which similarly, you want to be ideally around your chronological age, ideally a bit younger.
That was going to be my next question.
Sorry. Yeah.
No. I fully expect that my my metabolic age is on the floor, much like my all of my other ages.
And I think that's a really good point. Another important question for me when I ask women is really about their metabolic flexibility, which is your ability to kind of switch your mitochondria on, those lovely little structures in your cells that power up your cells. They're like battery packs. So how long are you able to kind of fire up your brain and your body? Do you find that you're exhausted by 4 p.m.? You crashing and burning, and then you're kind of absolutely wired at bedtime. And these are really classic features. That exhaustion as well, that bone aching exhaustion, is another real red flag for me of metabolic dysfunction. And another important question is also, how were your pregnancies if you've had a baby and if you've had a pregnancy to term? What were your energy levels like? Were you kind of crashing and burning? Were you kind of falling asleep at 4? I remember this very clearly. I was still operating as a surgeon, and I was just sitting on the sofa, just absolutely zoned out. And I thought I was just tired, but actually it was the beginnings of my metabolic dysfunction that I've worked really hard on for my own health. So one of my questions is, what was your pregnancy like? Because it's another important inflection point for your metabolism.
I feel like you're painting a picture of me right now, and I
Sorry.
need to come and see you immediately after this
welcome.
for all of this testing. It's fascinating. Final question: how important is the construct of social wellness as we go through life, as we age? It's something that's becoming spoken about more and more, but I think it's still relatively sort of ignored, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Critical is what I'd say. So, the simple things work, and we are human beings that are a species that loves hanging out. We commune, and women commune hugely. Look at us here tonight. It's a really important thing, and it's actually deeply powerful. It's deeply terrifying to people who don't understand what's going on. But we as a species need that for cell survival. Actually, it's interesting, if you take a cell out of its conversations with other cells, it will die. So
Gosh, that
it is
fascinating.
really important. You know, we have to communicate with other people, and ideally in person and not on tech. So lots of evidence to show how important loneliness is. We saw that in COVID. There's that lovely paper that links loneliness to being worse than smoking for 10 years. It is deeply linked with mortality and morbidity. So hang out with those people. Go paddleboard playing and pickleboard playing as well, isn't it? And those hobbies. So that's why I asked women, what was it that you loved doing? And one of my patients, literally the other day, she went, I just love dancing. And since she had a back injury 5 years ago, she's put on 4 stone and she just can't dance with her husband anymore. And I was like, right, that is right at the top of our list. We're going to be making sure that happens again. So that kind of connection is deeply empowering, really valuable.
We did a talk on mental health not long ago, and I remember the doctor who was there saying that he had 2 patients come in. One was the husband, one was the wife, and the wife said, oh, stop him from always going every week to the pub with his friends. He's every Friday in the pub. And he was just like, that's actually the best thing that you can be doing. Those regular social touch points, those are what keep us, vibrant and energetic and moving forward and excited for life. And I think that's the missing link sometimes for people, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think, if you look at male suicide rates, they are accelerating, and I think these areas for men and boys to hang out safely are also diminishing hugely. It is often in gaming rooms online that people are hanging out, and it's terrifying, isn't it?
Versus the in-person. It's another reason to have these conversations. You're right, they're so important. Thank you, Mayoni. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you. Our final speaker is the wonderful Emily Halil. She's a meditation expert, intuitive, tarot reader, very special human being. And I'm sure Emily will sort of tell you more. She works with all sorts of fabulous global brands, but she's also brilliant at just drilling down into what the client in front of her needs in the here and now, which I think a lot of us need. Emily, as meditation expert, tarot reader, intuitive, what do you make of future-proofing? Because this is really your world now, looking into the future.
Oh, gosh. So for me, we are spiritual beings in a physical body. So, of course, the physical body is fundamental to us being here. But for me, the nervous system is the seat of our soul. So for me, future-proofing starts in the nervous system. So if you think about, how busy our lives are, how full on our lives are, how we keep pushing. And I think that's kind of been a bit of a thread through the previous conversations here, is that especially as women, like we feel, or we like to feel invincible. And this sense of like, if we're not achieving, we're not performing, we're not being productive. But ultimately that all stems from our nervous system. So if our nervous system is upregulated all the time, our ability to actually heal and rest and relax, which is, of course, important to our longevity and our health and our overall well-being, whether that's physical, mental, spiritual. For me, it starts here. So that's really why I actually am so passionate about combining both meditation as a form of practice to really help us, of course, as an example of how we can slow down. But I also really believe that we don't have to meditate to take advantage of how we can start to down-regulate ultimately our nervous system. So for some people, meditation feels too far-fetched, it feels too difficult. I can certainly relate to that. Someone who has a very busy mind, as a former Gemini here, I have all my energy is here all the time. So there are many times where I can't sit and meditate because there's just too much here. So even just encouraging people to slow down as a form of like future-proofing to me is so important, because that's also when our intuition really starts to talk and shine through. So if you think when we're so busy and fast-paced, the world is so noisy that the quietest voice in the room is going to be our intuition. And I think as women, through centuries and centuries and centuries, we have been, and generations and generations and generations, we've been crucified for actually trusting ourselves. And actually, if we're not in a state of down-regulation, we're never going to hear ourselves. And we're constantly like outward focusing, outsourcing our decisions, our advice, the answers all the time, when actually we should be
Looking inwards.
Looking inwards, exactly.
And trusting ourselves more and trusting our intuition. And I'm so pleased to hear you give some airtime to the nervous system as well. I think it's so pivotal as we sort of look towards what the future holds for us as well. Who are the women that are coming to see? I know you seem women and men, but specifically as we're all women, apart from our lovely videographer and cameraman. Who are the women who are coming to see you? Why are they coming to see you?
So it's a real mix. Life definitely does its thing. So it throws curveballs, it gives us crossroads, it gives us blessings and opportunities that sometimes can be so in our face that we can't see them. So there are many women and also men that will come when they are at those crossroads where they are struggling to make a decision. Maybe there's a lack of clarity. Maybe they're lacking some confidence in their ability to make a decision. And it's always quite ironic because often I will conclude a reading with, but you already knew that, and they're like kind of laughing. Because they did. They just kind of wanted that confirmation, that clarity of knowing that maybe the decision that they thought they wanted to make was the right one.
I guess we don't always trust ourselves,
And
that goes back to what you said about looking inward a little bit more.
Completely. And I think what's also really fascinating is, for me, seeing more men, or reading for more men, which is always a joy, because it's actually for them something that I think women naturally, we are intuitive creatures. We are here to be intuitive. That's why when we become mothers, we have this deep resonance of mother intuition, because it's like this blessing that we have as like this sixth sense. But for men, it's almost like this alpha energy, like I'm right. And, men are also intuitive, but it shows up very differently.
They must be a tough crowd when they come in sometimes with that energy.
You can just see them soften, which is also lovely. Yeah. Because they do, I guess innately there is this sense of being a protector or a provider. So they gradually just soften, and they might say things like, but how did you know that? Or like, how did you, how can you connect with that? And it's just very, it's very enlightening.
So how can we rediscover that sense of intuition? I mean, the world we live in, you mentioned it just now, our minds are busy. The world is moving faster and faster. We're being pulled in all different directions. Yeah. We have AI at our fingertips, making us accelerate even more.
Completely.
It can be very noisy, and I think to trust our intuition means looking inward and being quiet. So how do we find that stillness when everything around us is chaos?
It's actually not easy, but what I want to remind us all here today is that it's not that it's not there, it's just that we can't hear it. So it's always going to be there. The world is noisy. Life is noisy. So if you think about the modern day life, phones, notifications, endless to-do lists, it's a lot, and it just becomes more difficult to connect with. So slowing down for me is the first thing that we can all try. And I think we were talking about this, Francesca, it's quite a funny analogy, but often my intuition comes when I'm doing my hair. Or, I've had women say, where did that idea come to you? I was doing my skincare routine. It's because our left brain is engaged. That's when our right, so like our feminine side really kicks in, which is, where our creativity is stored, where our intuition is living. So sometimes even when we're driving, so if you think of any activity where you're on autopilot, that can also heighten our intuitive senses. So slowing down, like I said before, not necessarily having to like meditate or journal. It could be just spending time in nature, because nature is a high vibrational frequency. So naturally, when we're in nature, of course, you hear people say, you naturally feel better. That's because of the vibrational frequency of the trees, the plants, the flowers, the birds, the fresh air. That's just where we start to vibrate at the same frequency as nature, which ultimately just gives us this sense of calm, which is why hugging trees is such a joy, because it's like this quick fix.
It's so grounding. Actually, Mayoni and I were talking, I was saying I feel very middle-aged because my meditation nowadays is basically being in my garden and pottering around with a pair of secateurs, and I'm
amazing.
So happy.
Like
but
weeding,
I'm obviously connecting at the same vibration as
completely.
nature.
It's very therapeutic. But so slowing down is important. Again, trying to redirect our awareness towards ourselves. So if you think about when we are trying to make a decision, it's, Google, it's AI, it's your mum, it's your dad, it's your brother, it's your husband, it's your wife, anyone but ourselves. So how can we quieten that external noise to give us the opportunity to actually ask ourselves the question, which I think I'm terrible at doing. And I think women are also very fearful about making the wrong decision. So I often say to women, there isn't a wrong decision. It's like, I've got choice A or I've got choice B. Which one's the right one? I said, neither of them are right, neither of them are wrong. So you've just got to have faith that actually what will unfold will be, and it's the right path that
I think
will
it's
unfold.
so hard though, because as a woman, often you're spinning so many plates, and you have this overwhelming sense of responsibility, you know,
Completely.
for yourself, for your career, for your family, for
Yeah.
your partner, for external family. You know, that there's a lot, there's a huge amount of weight that we carry on our shoulders, and I think that means that when we're presented with a, you know, this or that, a decision, we really sometimes overthink it. What's that expression? Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, completely.
And we really can get stuck when there's too much overwhelm and too much noise.
And I think that's where, during a reading, it kind of gives us this opportunity to pause and reflect. And it's actually it can be quite an emotional experience, actually. And a lot of women are like, oh gosh, I'm crying. I'm like, no, it's very normal, because whether I'm using cards or I'm not using cards, there's a very profound feeling of feeling heard and seen without actually even saying a single word. So to really feel that energetically is quite like a...
I think because it's such a personal, intimate act. I
Yeah.
was actually fortunate enough to do a tarot reading with Emily when I was in Dubai. I think it must have been about 2 years or so ago, because Emily can do the readings virtually, which I think is a really interesting practice. You sometimes think you have to be together in person, but you can do it over a Zoom, and you pull cards together. It feels very collaborative, but you're so right, because it's this moment where you think that everything is about you in that moment.
Completely.
And when do we ever get that focus on us as women, as individuals?
Yeah.
It's very rare.
So it becomes this pause, moment of stillness, but also reflection, because we don't really slow down. And when we do slow down, it's probably not for ourselves, or we're not in a headspace to think, actually, you know, what is it that we want? Where do we see ourselves going? What are our wildest dreams that we really want to like bring into reality? So I think that's the beauty of energy ultimately. And I think for me, when I'm doing a reading, I'm actually reading someone's energy, but I'm also tuning into their own intuition, which is why I think you get a lot of women that are like, oh, I kind of already knew that, or I thought that, but I wasn't sure.
It's a bit of a chemistry, isn't it?
It is.
It's
Yeah.
very, very interesting. For anyone who's not familiar with tarot, can you explain a little bit about the
Yeah, of
guiding
course.
principles of it, and what you're striving to achieve?
Absolutely. So tarot is a very ancient form of ultimately reading energy. So, I mean, there's 78 cards. It very much mirrors a traditional pack of playing cards in the sense that there are 4 suits, all of which are connected with different elementals. But in addition, there's 21 what we call major arcana cards, which often the famous ones are like the Empress, the Emperor, the Devil, the Death card, like these big energy cards that will appear feeling into different moments in life. And ultimately, the 78 cards are tuning into every emotion, pattern, life event that can happen at any one point in someone's life. So it's called the journey of a fool, but it's like the journey of life that the cards ultimately represent. But they have this way of connecting with our feelings, with with patterns, with life events, and like we were saying, whether that's, you know, helping someone make a decision or feel more clear on a decision, or, you know, they're like unfolding grief or motherhood or fertility. There's so many reasons why, or like how the cards can actually support someone, inspire someone, but always meeting them where they are. So I'm never going to tell someone something that isn't to do that, inspire, support, or empower someone. Because I often get asked, well, if something comes up that might not feel so positive, will you not tell me? And I'm like, well, I always read with the purest of intention. So I never actually receive any guidance or any messages that may have like a low vibrational energy. And I'm very strict with my like energy hygiene. So there's a lot of like grounding that I need to do and space clearing before and after a reading, which funnily enough, I always meditate before a reading as well. That's a way of clearing my own field. So it's very difficult to read someone if you're reading yourself, because, you know, you might be feeling an emotion that day or something's happened. So you really have to like clear that out of your system to be able to really accurately read someone else's.
I think what's really interesting is your way of doing tarot, or sort of helping somebody to look towards their future, interpret it, whatever you might call it. It's not a black or white. It's not a this is an option or this is an option, or even worse, this is what your future looks like. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are a bit fearful of that. They want to feel that they have some say in what their future looks like as well, that we can steer things a little bit. You and I spoke about it once before, and I think we said it was about sowing the seed of possibility. And I think that's such a lovely way to describe it, because I think what you do is you almost, present sort of different ways of looking at one's future, and you show what the possibility could be. And actually, it's nice because Mayoni spoke about sort of dreams and what do you want to do when you're younger, and we forget that. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is sort of tapping back into that. Yeah. What did we want? What are we looking to achieve? Where does our future take us?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. They say actually up until the age of 12, we are so clear with our gifts, like we know. And it could be anything. It could be a creative gift. It could be that we're great with numbers, we're great with people, we're a communicator, like we're here to, break records. But through schooling systems, social systems, family systems, lots of different systems, we're kind of guided away from that. So there is a sense of, okay, what was it when we were 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, what was it that we loved? Maybe it was dancing, maybe it was something else, but that's often that remembering. And I think that's really important with how we reconnect with ourselves, because there is so much of that influence or external validation that we seek, or comparison that we do with each other, that actually guides us further and further away from that, because we, as pack animals, as social beings, we also want to be liked and accepted, and this communal sense of like well-being is also part of our innate nature. So we tend to mold into each other, which is quite ironic, really. Yeah.
You're right. I think actually touching on children, because we spoke about this earlier with somebody in the room, and children are so wildly intuitive, and it's a shame, because I think so much of the way children are growing up at the moment is very virtual. It is about connecting through social media. Yeah. They're not as connected perhaps as we used to be sort of in previous years. And it's it strikes me as a powerful thing that we could be doing to almost re-encourage that for them.
Yeah, and interesting, a lot of that is to do with our brain development. So our third eye here, actually, when we age past 7, ultimately like changes. So the veil up until 7 is very thin, which is why you may have had experiences with children where they've kind of spoken to people that might have passed over, or they just have this sixth sense of knowing, or they might say a name and then it becomes clear, and it's very incredible, really. And I think that is often a reminder to us that it's still there. We just need to tune in.
If we can't, do a reading with you, what are the other ways that we can feel a greater sense of clarity in our future? Is there anything else that we can take away from here tonight into our own sort of homes, into our own spaces?
Question. Yeah, I really love this question, because clarity, we often think we have to kind of sit still to like hear. But I actually think clarity is often found through doing.
Movement.
Through movement, yeah. So maybe it's taking a step. So maybe today it's, maybe there is a decision that needs to be made. Maybe you're feeling stuck, or, unsure what, there's just this feeling or this knowing that there's change coming. And maybe actually today it's about firstly finding a little bit of stillness. Again, doesn't have to be meditating, but it could just be having a quiet moment on the edge of your bed before you go to sleep. Maybe it's in your car, maybe it's like having driving, or maybe it's when you're doing when you make your coffee, and that becomes a bit of a ritual for you, and that becomes your moment of like self-connection. But I would say anything you can do to reduce the noise. So anything that's like I say, we're so externally facing and we consume so much. It's how we can minimize that, quieten that down, to allow us to really deeply connect with ourselves. And then just start small. So maybe it's not outsourcing a decision to someone, like as simple as what should we have for dinner tonight? No, don't outsource that decision, just make a decision. Or like, do you want this or that? Or, oh, I'm not sure, do I buy this dress or that dress? I'll ask my friend. No, just trust your own decision, that it'll be the right decision. And then I think the more you build your relationship with your intuition, and the more that you honor it, I think the more it will show up for you. And then you'll also get to know the tone of the voice. Like I said, it does whisper, annoyingly, it whispers. So we do have to have a quieter mind to hear it. But just start small, because we've all got it.
I love that. Go back to trusting ourselves more.
Yeah, exactly that.
We all have the answers. Amazing. Thank you so much, Emily.
So much.
Always fabulous to speak with you. That very much brings us to the end of this evening's conversation. And I have to say, it was so fabulous listening to all of you. And it's interesting because I think when I initially was thinking about the construct of this conversation, I was thinking future-proofing, and we're going to be talking about, all of the like the cold plunges and the sort of, super high-tech like surgeries of the future and the fabulousness of tarot. But actually, everything that you've all come together to talk about is very much about, really slowing down, and it's paying attention to ourselves, noticing when we're going into that perimenopausal period, listening to our intuition a little bit more, trusting ourselves, and really placing our trust as well in the practitioners and the people who can help us to make those decisions as we go into the future. If there are any questions for our speakers, we're happy to take them now. Otherwise, I think they'll all be here for a little bit longer. And if you'd like to be connected with anyone that you heard speak here this evening, just leave your details on the referral card and we'll connect you after the event. If you do need to scoot off as well, don't forget to pick up your goodie bag on the way out. And were there any questions from our audience? Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for speaking. Really, really insightful. So I have a question for Saleena. I think I found everything you said really, really interesting. I think you spoke a lot about collagen, and I'm just wondering, I think there are so many supplements out there for collagen, and usually taken orally. And so how do you feel about them? Because I think there's been so much speculation about it being filtered out through your system and doesn't actually help and all of that stuff. So what do you think about it?
Do you know, I thought this question would come up.
It's literally our number one most popular question at the events, I think.
And I think a lot of us in the science community, it's a difficult one, if I'm honest. The research isn't quite there to back up oral collagen supplementation, and largely because it does depend on the type of collagen you take. So if they're large molecules, it's highly likely it'll just get broken down and you'll probably wee it out, if I'm honest. But where I stand, and if we look at the research, there are some weak evidence, some plastic surgeons even like you taking collagen shots, certain types, to help to improve skin quality and things like that. But again, the research and the evidence is quite weak. So we haven't got robust studies for it yet. They will probably come in the future, but a lot of the minute is showing that actually it's probably quite weak. Where I stand is try and rather than thinking about oral supplementation of collagen, which can help to some degree, it can help to, perhaps improve things like joints, that term of collagen rather than skin. But where I stand is probably start thinking about things that actually help to produce collagen in the body. So rather than thinking, right, I'm going to take actual oral collagen, think of what builds collagen. So it's a protein block. So improve things like your protein content in your diet, water for healthy lipid cells generally, reducing your protein damage. So things like your UV, your smoking, supplementation with things like your zinc, your copper, your kind of peptides type of things. And again, that's something that is an emerging market, especially in the UK, because we don't really have any massively licensed things like that just yet. But really, again, take it back to basics. So your protein, your vitamin D, your vitamin C, your other multivitamins, basically, and think about the things that actually might help with long-term collagen production or restoration, or help with supporting your actual natural collagen. And then also looking at your wider health, so things like your hormones. There are actually probably bigger things to look at in terms of collagen banking than just supplementation is probably where I'd go. And actually, if for skin itself, you're probably better with things like topical help with regenerative things like your antioxidants, like your retinol, like your SPF. Protecting your skin will do you better in the long run than perhaps an oral collagen supplementation will.
I feel like people always like the collagen supplementation because it feels like it's something they're doing on the daily for themselves. But I think you're right to look at the bigger picture as well and think about where skincare and then the in-clinic interventions fit in as well.
Yeah.
Super. Are there any more questions?
I might just add to that
Yes,
as well,
please.
actually. And what collagen also does is it improves the gut barrier. So it reduces that inflammatory leakiness that happens. So there's probably evidence to show that that's also where it's acting. And a lot of the supplements, the collagen supplements, have also got those other goodies in them as well. So I think that's why it's hard to unpick what's actually happening.
Yeah.
What do you recommend as the sort of, I guess, baseline supplementation that we could all be benefiting from right now as women?
I think, again, I'm very much a test, don't guess person when it comes to supplementation, but bone broth is a fantastic kind of other all-rounder for if we're talking about gut barrier function. So there are other places that you can sit. And also, I think another important thing to understand is what is your methylation status, what is your ability to detoxify and make hormones and break them down, and also make neurotransmitters and repair your DNA. So there are other places to sit that I would probably spend my money on, to be honest.
Perfect. Hopefully that was helpful. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this evening's conversation. And if you'd like to know anything more, then I'm sure all of our speakers will be here a little longer to chat to you. Suffice for me to say a big thank you to Soho House for hosting us, to everyone in our audience for coming. I hope you found it helpful. And finally, to our amazing Beauty Triangle panel for all of your amazing insights and wisdom.
Thank you.